The gathering storm, a nation divided. The United Kingdom is at a crossroads, facing a crisis of identity, sovereignty, and sustainability. At the heart of this crisis lies a single emotive issue: immigration. Never before has the influx of people to these shores been so high, nor the debate so heated. A growing chorus of voices, self-proclaimed patriots, are now demanding a radical solution: a complete lockdown of the UK's borders for 5 years. Is this a necessary step to protect British identity and resources, or a dangerous descent into xenophobia? The answer is far from simple. The call for a border lockdown is not born in a vacuum. It emerges from a confluence of anxieties and frustrations. Record numbers of immigrants have arrived in recent years, straining public services and fueling a sense of cultural displacement. The pressure on housing, healthcare, and education is palpable. For many, it feels like the very fabric of British society is being stretched to its breaking point. The year is 2025. The UK has finally left the bureaucratic embrace of the European Union. Yet, the promise taking back control rings hollow for many. Drowning in numbers, immigration and its impacts. The numbers tell a stark story. In 2024 alone, over 750,000 legal immigrants made the UK their new home. This figure doesn't even account for the thousands who crossed the channel illegally, seeking asylum or simply disappearing into the anonymity of Britain's sprawling cities. The impact of this influx is undeniable. Hospitals and schools are overcrowded. Housing waiting lists are longer than ever. Competition for jobs is fierce, especially in lower-income brackets. The National Health Service, once the pride of Britain, is struggling to cope with the increased demand. Schools are grappling with language barriers and cultural differences. Social housing, already in short supply, is stretched even thinner. Faces of the movement: who's leading the charge? The movement for a 5-year border lockdown is not a monolithic entity. It encompasses a spectrum of individuals and groups with varying motivations and ideologies. At its forefront are seasoned political players like Nigel Farage, the former leader of the UK Independence Party and a prominent figure in the Brexit campaign. Farage, known for his fiery rhetoric and populist appeal, has re-emerged on the political scene with his new party, Reform UK, advocating for a hardline stance on immigration. Alongside Farage stand a cohort of Conservative MPs, once relegated to the fringes of the party, who now find their views gaining traction among the Conservative base. These MPs, often representing constituencies most affected by immigration, argue that the Conservative government has betrayed its promise to control immigration, and that a radical solution is needed. Grassroots organizations, fueled by social media and a sense of shared grievance, have sprung up across the country. These groups, with names like British First and Patriotic Alternative, often espouse more extreme views, bordering on nativism and outright racism. While their influence on mainstream politics should not be overstated, they tap into a deep well of anxiety and resentment that cannot be ignored. A nation divided: public opinion on lockdown. The call for a 5-year border lockdown has cleaved British society down the middle. Public opinion is sharply divided, reflecting the complex and often contradictory attitudes towards immigration. Polls paint a picture of a nation wrestling with its identity in an increasingly globalized world. A recent YouGov poll revealed that 55% of Britons support stricter immigration controls, with 30% in favor of a complete ban on immigration for a set period. The reasons for supporting stricter controls are varied. Some cite concerns about the strain on public services, while others worry about the impact on British culture and identity. The perception that immigrants are more likely to be criminals or a drain on the welfare system also plays a role, despite evidence to the contrary. For many, it boils down to a simple question of fairness. Why should those born outside the UK be entitled to the same benefits and opportunities as those born here? On the other side of the divide are those who view the call for a border lockdown with horror. Section 5. A double-edged sword: benefits and risks of lockdown. The prospect of a 5-year border lockdown throws up a bewildering array of potential consequences, both positive and negative. Advocates of the policy argue that it would give the UK much-needed breathing space to address the challenges posed by mass immigration. They envision a scenario where public services are no longer overwhelmed, where housing waiting lists shrink, and where British workers are no longer priced out of the job market by cheaper foreign labor. A border lockdown, they argue, would also allow the UK to regain control of its borders and implement a more selective immigration system, prioritizing skilled workers who can contribute to the economy. However, critics of the policy paint a far bleaker picture. They warn of catastrophic economic consequences, arguing that a sudden halt to immigration would cripple industries that rely on foreign labor, from agriculture to healthcare to technology. They point out that 1 in 4 NHS doctors is foreign-born, and that a border lockdown would exacerbate existing staff shortages, putting the entire healthcare system at risk. Section 6. Between a rock and a hard place. The government's dilemma. The UK government finds itself caught between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, it faces mounting public pressure to address the perceived crisis at the borders. The issue of immigration dominated the 2024 general election, with all major parties promising stricter controls. Failure to deliver on these promises risks alienating voters and fueling support for more radical parties like Reform UK. On the other hand, the government is acutely aware of the potential economic and social costs of a border lockdown. Business leaders have warned of dire consequences for the economy, while human rights groups have condemned the policy as inhumane and discriminatory. The government is also constrained by international law, which obliges it to offer asylum to those fleeing persecution. So far, the government has resisted calls for a complete border lockdown, opting instead for a piecemeal approach. It has tightened visa requirements, increased funding for border security, and pledged to crack down on illegal immigration. Section 7. Echoes across the Channel. Europe's migration headache. The UK is not alone in grappling with the challenges of mass immigration. Across Europe, countries are struggling to cope with the influx of migrants and refugees, fleeing war, poverty, and persecution. The European Union's open borders policy, once hailed as a symbol of unity and progress, is now under immense strain. A 2024 Ipsos poll across 18 EU states revealed that 51% of Europeans have a negative view of the EU's migration policy, with 71% demanding stronger border controls. This dissatisfaction is fueling the rise of far-right parties across the continent, from France's National Rally to Italy's League, to Germany's Alternative for Germany. The European migrant crisis has exposed deep divisions within the EU, with some countries like Hungary and Poland refusing to accept their share of refugees. Section 8. Election year, showdown, border lockdown, as a political pawn. As the UK gears up for another general election in 2027, the issue of immigration is once again taking center stage. The Conservative government, under pressure from both the right and the left, is promising even stricter immigration controls. The Labour Party, traditionally seen as more pro-immigration, is also adopting a tougher stance, fearing that failure to do so will cost them votes. The rise of Reform UK, Nigel Farage's new anti-immigration party, has further complicated the political landscape. Reform UK is polling well among voters disillusioned with the two main parties, particularly those who feel that neither Labour nor the Conservatives have done enough to control immigration. The danger is that the issue of immigration will be used as a political football, with parties outbidding each other with promises of ever stricter controls, regardless of the feasibility or desirability of such policies. In such an environment, rational debate about the costs and benefits of immigration becomes almost impossible. Section 9, a solution or a slogan, the future of UK borders. The demand for a 5-year border lockdown is more than just a policy proposal. It's a symptom of a deeper malaise within British society. It reflects a sense of anxiety and uncertainty about the future, a fear of rapid change and a loss of control. But is a border lockdown the answer? Will it really solve the UK's problems or simply exacerbate them? The evidence suggests that the reality is far more complex than the simplistic solutions offered by those who advocate for a complete shutdown of the UK's borders. The challenge for the UK is not to shut itself off from the world but to find a way to engage with it in a way that benefits its citizens. This means finding a sustainable approach to immigration, one that balances the need for control with the need for talent, compassion, and a respect for human rights.